Hey guys, tonight we drift back to the lush, smoky plains of 17th century Central Africa. The air is heavy with the scent of rain-drenched earth and oil lamps. You trudge through tall elephant grass, brushing away fat-bodied flies that buzz like distant drums. Beneath the haze of humidity and looming Portuguese ambition, a girl is born, one who will one day sit upon a throne made not of gold, but of human dignity flipped inside out. Queen Njinga of Ndongo, a name you maybe don't remember from your history class. A name you definitely should. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else can't sleep tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in the kingdom of Ndongo sometime around 1583. It smells like iron and mango trees. Ndongo lies east of the kingdom of Congo in what's now Angola. It's a patchwork of hills, forests, rivers, and villages that pulse with the steady heartbeat of ancestral drums. The Mbundu people rule here, led by kings or Angolas, which, fun fact, is where the name Angola comes from. The power structure. Loosely feudal. The king hands out power like party favors to lesser nobles and regional governors, all of whom are trying very hard not to get stabbed in the back. Or cursed. Or both. Portuguese traders hover like mosquitoes along the coast, buzzing about sugar and slaves. They've already sunk their teeth into Congo and are licking their lips at Ndongo next. They've brought muskets missionaries, and an economy based entirely on human bodies. It's all very fun at first until you realize they're not leaving. You, however, are here not for the colonizers, but for a child born into the ruling family, Princess Njinga. She enters the world as storms roll across the sky. No, really. Oral tradition says a wild tempest hit the royal compound the night she was born. Lightning cracked, birds fell silent, and even the crocodiles in the river blinked. A bad omen, or just dramatic foreshadowing. You shuffle through the corridors of the royal compound, catching glimpses of the young princess, small, curious, already stubborn. Historians still argue whether she was her father's favorite because she was brilliant, or because she could argue her way out of trouble with a well-timed smirk. Either way, she gets access to things most girls don't: tutors, royal ceremonies, and the war council. Njinga watches everything, learns everyone. While her brothers wrestle and yell, she listens. While the men brag about lion hunts, she counts who commands which warriors, who has debts, who owes favors. You spot her slipping into meetings, just barely seen. She doesn't need to be loud yet. There's time. She's got decades to steal the show. Her father, Ngola Kiluanji, is no pushover. He's at war with the Portuguese, and he knows the battlefield isn't just trees and spears. It's paperwork diplomacy and calculated charm. Njinga tags along when he speaks to messengers from Congo or Portuguese friars offering peace with one hand and shackles with the other. Sometimes you trail behind her into the women's quarters, where her mother and aunties chant crush herbs and whisper into firelight. The royal women hold power here too in their own network of secrets and spirit rites. They teach Njinga that to rule, you must know the language of the ancestors and the enemy, preferably while looking fabulous. Quirky tidbit, the Mbundu believed twins were dangerous bad mojo. So, when Njinga's mother gives birth to twins after her, everyone holds their breath. Fortunately, they both die young, which is a terrible thing to say, but, well, It eased the tension in the palace. You wince a little at that part. Ndongo is a kingdom in slow-motion crisis. The Portuguese, with their slick mustaches and even slicker trade deals, want one thing: captives. Enslaved people. To feed the sugarcane economy in Brazil, where death is quick and profits are quicker. Ndongo's leaders are stuck in a bleak choice: resist and face annihilation, or cooperate and sell your neighbors. Njinga grows up watching the adults fumble with that impossible choice. Every treaty signed seems to come with a gotcha clause. Every missionary smiling at the altar seems to be mapping the land for conquest. And every local noble looking to protect their village just might betray the whole kingdom in the process. You glimpse it all through Njinga's eyes, the parade of gifts from Lisbon, the hush around each new shipment of captives, the way maps grow redder and redder with European flags. The drama isn't loud, yet it's slow, sticky, creeping like ivy. By now, Njinga is mastering the art of pause. Her words come measured. Her presence already unnerves grown men. She starts wearing symbols of kingship, an aggressive choice for a girl, even a royal one. At festivals, she dances closer to the fire than expected. At dinners, she asks the priests about their Latin scripture and rolls her eyes at the answers. She learns to fight too. Not just court fencing, but real battle tactics. Throwing spears, ambush maneuvers, field formations. There's a story that she once out-wrestled one of her older cousins and then offered him a mango to soothe his bruised ego. Classic Njinga: dominance, then charm. Historians still argue whether Njinga's father groomed her to rule or merely tolerated her brilliance. What's certain is that she started laying bricks for her legacy long before anyone thought she could rule. Long before the infamous chair incident. Long before Europe started whispering her name like a spell, and long before sleep was an option. Sorry, you're still very much awake, but hey, at least you're lying down. You wake or drift further into dream as the palace shadows stretch longer, thicker with secrets. Njinga is no longer a child. She moves through Ndongo's capital like smoke, soft, swift, and stinging if you try to catch her. Every corridor murmurs her name, though always half-swallowed. Too bold, too clever, too something. By now she's in her late teens or early 20s. Her father's growing older, his war with the Portuguese growing colder and crueler. You hear reports of villages burned, chiefs bribed rivers clogged with bodies headed for the slave ports. It's not a war you win in a single battle. It's a slow erosion of trust land people. Njinga doesn't just watch this unfold, she studies it like a language. She tracks the changing borders, learns how Portuguese commanders flirt and lie, how missionaries gossip. She learns to play all the roles expected of her dutiful daughter. Political pawn-sharp listener who never forgets a name or a face. Sometimes she rides out with the war bands. No parade, no drums. Just her horse, a short sword, and that look she wears like armor boredom with the world edged in ambition. You ride behind her ducking vines and mosquito clouds, and you notice something odd. The warriors listen to her. Really listen. That's no small thing. In a society built on rank and ritual, Njinga is nudging invisible lines. One moment, she's handing out gourds of palm wine at a feast, smiling like a perfect hostess. The next, she's whispering to commanders about weak spots in enemy lines. You don't even know when she slipped from princess to shadow advisor, but she did. And no one stopped her. There's one story, a fringe account from a Jesuit letter, that Njinga once beat a Portuguese interpreter at his own language game. He twisted her father's words during a peace negotiation, hoping to make the deal lean Portuguese. She corrected him mid-meeting in flawless Portuguese, then smiled so slowly it was considered a tactical strike. No one challenged her again that day. You're not sure it really happened that way. Historians still argue whether she was fluent that early or just really good at faking it. But the story stuck. And in power, that's what counts. Back in the royal compound, you trail her through quieter rooms, places where incense lingers and drums murmur like old stomachs. These are the inner chambers where Njinga trains in the less military, more mystical arts. Dream interpretation, genealogy chants, ritual greeting phrases longer than some poems. She learns which herbs bring clarity and which ones, well, silence someone permanently. Her mother's gone by now, probably dead, though no one says so plainly. Just one fewer voice in the circle. Njinga steps into the gap. Not fully a queen yet, not quite a general, but definitely not just a daughter anymore. One night, there's a commotion. You shuffle outside the palace walls. Smoke coils up like a ghost tail. Word spreads one of the outer provinces defected. The Portuguese bribed the local leader with gun salt and promises not worth the paper they were written on. Njinga doesn't blink. She disappears for 3 days. Comes back with a blood-stained sash and new maps. The territory isn't exactly recovered, but the message is clear defection comes with a very personal tax. As the seasons pass, the air grows tighter. The Portuguese are no longer just visitors on the coast. They've built fortresses, towns, supply chains. They marry local women, convert a few chiefs, and keep offering to help govern. The kind of help that makes kingdoms vanish. Njinga's father dies. Possibly from illness. Possibly from stress. Possibly from an ill-cooked meal served by someone who smiled too much. You're not sure. Records blur. What matters is the void he leaves. And just like that, Njinga's half-brother Mbandi becomes king. Mbandi is not a fan of strong sisters. He sees Njinga as a threat even though she's never challenged him publicly. Yet. You watch from the sidelines as he exiles her, not formally, just enough to make it clear she's not welcome at court. He strips her of titles, denies her access to advisors, and even according to one suspiciously gossipy monk, has her infant son murdered to eliminate future competition. You don't breathe for a beat. Neither does Njinga. But she doesn't scream, she doesn't fight. She nods, bows, leaves. Quietly, she starts building something new. A shadow court. Loyal warriors. Disgruntled nobles who miss her father's discipline and suspect Mbandi's got too much Portuguese wine in his bloodstream. A fringe tale from a traveling trader says Njinga spent her exile disguised as a man living among warriors to learn their language from the inside. Total myth. Probably. But by now, Njinga has become the kind of person who attracts myths like moths to a silk cloak, and Mbandi. He starts losing ground, both literally and figuratively. His alliances falter. The Portuguese double-deal him. Villages stop sending tribute. Even his own commanders whisper that perhaps the wrong sibling wears the crown. Eventually, he realizes he needs help. He calls Njinga back, sends for her like a man trying not to admit he's drowning. You walk with her as she returns, not groveling, not grandstanding, just walking. And in her silence is the weight of someone who knows her moment is coming. Not yet, but soon. You stand under a brooding sky as Njinga returns to court, not like a prodigal daughter, not like a scorned sister, but like a diplomat walking into a den of paper-thin alliances. She steps through the palace gates with no crown, no army, no open threat. Just grace, precision, and that look in her eyes that says, "Try me." Mbandi greets her with a half-smile and a too-loud voice as if volume might mask insecurity. You catch the tension in the air sharp as dry grass before a brush fire. He needs her. Everyone knows it. But he also fears her. Also well known. Njinga, though, she just bows. What's really happening here is strategy. The Portuguese have pushed harder into Ndongo raiding villages, enslaving thousands. Mbandi, desperate, and in over his head agrees to send Njinga as his envoy to the Portuguese colonial capital, Luanda. It's a gamble, but she's the only one who speaks fluent. Portuguese understands European protocol and can smile while planning your funeral. You follow her to Luanda, a city where nothing is quiet. Bells ring, carts rattle waves, crash and gossip sticks to your skin like humidity. Portuguese governors strut around in armor that's more decoration than defense, while slaves, many kidnapped from Ndongo, carry goods, cook meals, build fortifications. Njinga enters the hall of negotiation draped in fine cloth. Face, calm eyes, observant. The room falls silent, mostly because she's a black African woman walking into a European-styled court with the poise of a chess master. Then comes the moment. They don't offer her a chair. Just imagine everyone seated in high-backed thrones and carved benches, and there's Njinga standing. Not an accident. A message. You don't belong here. Subtle, brutal diplomacy. But Njinga doesn't flinch. Instead, she turns to one of her servants, probably a loyal attendant, maybe even someone who'd practiced this beforehand, and gestures. The servant kneels, and Njinga calmly sits upon their back regal as ever, spine straight, gaze unbothered. That's the moment. That's the image. Not just Queen Njinga, but Queen moves first. Historians still argue whether this actually happened or was dramatized by European chroniclers with a flair for the theatrical. But what matters is it stuck. In political memory, in artistic representations, in the slow, stunned silence that followed. Njinga had responded to a deliberate insult with theatrical dominance without raising her voice or drawing a blade. The Portuguese governor, possibly flustered, definitely intrigued, proceeds with the meeting. What follows is a long, knotted negotiation. Njinga argues for the end of Portuguese attacks on Ndongo, the release of captives, and an agreement for peaceful coexistence. In return, she offers conversion to Christianity, recognition of Portuguese authority in certain contested zones, and, here's the kicker, a pledge to stop Ndongo from harboring runaway slaves. Did she mean it? Did she believe it? Or was it all a shell game to buy time? Well, Njinga agrees to be baptized. She kneels again, not before the governor, but before a priest in a flowing European gown. She takes the Christian name Ana de Sousa, after the governor's wife, because even Njinga knew how to play flattery like a violin. That baptism, though, it's weirdly theatrical. Like soap opera levels of dramatic. Some say she wept. Others say she delivered a perfectly timed speech about embracing the faith. There's even a side report that she insisted on doing the whole thing in Latin. Again, can't confirm. But she had a flair for optics, and this was a high-stakes photo shoot if ever there was one. Afterward, the governor throws a banquet. Gold platters, sizzling meats, flaky fish, Goblets of wine passed like secrets. Njinga toasts like a European duchess, but eats like someone who grew up knowing famine. She chats, she jokes, she makes Portuguese officers laugh, then slices their assumptions in half with one well-placed phrase. Fringe tidbit. A letter from a Dutch merchant claims that Njinga once turned down a Portuguese governor's offer of marriage by saying she preferred to marry entire nations. Flirt or warning. Back in Ndongo, her brother Mbandi has no idea what he's unleashed. While he's busy not leading well, Njinga returns with more than a peace agreement. She brings legitimacy, a European name, a royal baptism. Whispers that she's the only one who can deal with the outside world. You wander the capital again and feel it. The mood has shifted. People greet Njinga with deeper bows. Warriors start showing up at her compound, not his. Chiefs delay meetings with Mbandi to attend hers. And Mbandi. He spirals. Maybe guilt, maybe paranoia. Maybe just the slow unraveling of a man who knows he's already lost even while technically on the throne. He dies not long after. Some say suicide. Others whisper poisoning. Still, others suggest it was heartbreak over the weight of power. Historians still argue whether it was Njinga's plan or his own demons that ended him. All you know is the throne is suddenly empty. So what does Njinga do? She waits, just a little. Then she makes her move. Not with a coronation, no, that would be too obvious. She assumes the role of regent, claiming she'll rule temporarily for her nephew. The same nephew whose existence may or may not have been erased earlier awkward. The important thing is she steps in. Smoothly, like it was inevitable. She takes over court rituals, military logistics, diplomatic messages. No one stops her. How could they? She's already been queen in everything but title. And just like that, she sits firmly this time on a real throne. Not made of flesh, but of sharp memory, clever tactics, and one iconic kneel that turned humiliation into legend. The throne beneath you doesn't creak. It doesn't sigh. It simply holds you as if even the wood knows who's in charge now. Njinga is queen not in name alone, but in every heartbeat of Ndongo's court. And you get to watch her rearrange the world from that seat. At first, she calls herself Regent Sure, a polite fiction. But everyone knows. You see it in the way generals bow deeper, the way messengers rush faster to her chambers, the way enemies hesitate at her name. Titles are just decorations when power already listens. Njinga wastes no time. The Portuguese treaty. She presses it, holds them accountable for every word. When they stall on returning hostages, she writes again, and again. And then when politeness fails, she raids a Portuguese-held village like she's just testing their sense of memory. She builds alliances with surgical precision. You watch as she reshuffles the Ndongo nobility, favoring loyalty over blood. Some of the old guard grumble. She smiles at them like a woman who knows where their sons sleep. And the whispers die down. Now, let's talk about her military brain, because it's not just about clever letters and royal robes. Njinga starts to reform her army. Yes, you're in the tent, watching her sketch plans in the dust with a dagger. She recruits women warriors, something most kingdoms snicker at, until those same women split lines like lightning. She gives land to veterans, builds supply chains, introduces a reward system for intel. She doesn't fight the way her father did with raw numbers and ancient tactics. She fights like someone who's watched the Portuguese play chess with people's lives and decided she'll flip the board. Here's a quirky one. One account claims she wore men's clothing during battle and led troops herself, sometimes disguised, sometimes not. Whether that's fact or embellishment, historians still argue. But soldiers swear they saw her cut through enemy lines more than once, her voice steady, her hair tied high, her presence undeniable, and her court a fascinating blend. Some days it feels European letters in Portuguese Catholic rituals, carved furniture brought from Luanda. Other days it's deeply traditional ancestral rites, drumming sessions, oral historians chanting genealogy into candle smoke. She doesn't pick sides, she stitches them together like a patchwork quilt that happens to be bulletproof. Now about that servant throne incident, remember it. You'd think it would fade into myth. Instead, Njinga leans into it. She doesn't deny it, doesn't explain. She just lets the world talk. And they do. Traders retell it in border taverns. European officers murmur about it behind fans. Even rival kings start using it in insults, and that means they're afraid. That kind of myth is power. Pure, silent dominance. You notice she adopts more ceremonial control, too. She insists on strict court etiquette. No one turns their back to her. Visitors wait for hours just to kneel. She becomes an event, every movement calibrated, every silence weighted. If you're close enough, you see the planning behind the poise. But peace, no, not yet. The Portuguese soon realize they've underestimated her. Again. When they attempt another expansion, this time pushing into inland Ndongo territory with promises and powder, Njinga retaliates. Not with one grand battle, but with a campaign of attrition. Hit and run raids. Cut supply routes. Encourage defections. She turns the land itself against them, flooded paths, disappearing guides, diseases no armor can stop. At night, by firelight, you hear her murmur with advisors. Planning, adjusting, learning. This is no static queen waiting for fate. This is a strategist evolving mid-war. And then there's the Catholic Church. Njinga keeps them close, but not too close. She maintains her Christian front when useful, even inviting missionaries into her court. But she never fully surrenders the local spiritual practices. Her people still pour libations to the ancestors, still consult diviners. And Njinga, she walks both worlds. She attends Mass. And later she'll consult the stars. Fringe fact, there's a possibly apocryphal account of her carrying a crucifix in one hand and a spear in the other during a peace march. Symbolism. Absolutely. Accurate debated. Legendary, no question. Her enemies grow uneasy. She doesn't behave like a woman, or a man, or a puppet monarch. She behaves like a force. And then, something unexpected, and Njinga makes a move no one sees coming. She reaches out to the Dutch. Yes, the Dutch. Rivals of the Portuguese. Protestant. Sea-loving. Gold-hungry. She writes to them proposing an alliance. A smart move, because if you're fighting colonialism, two competing colonial powers are better than one omnipotent one. Let them cancel each other out while you strengthen your roots. Soon, Dutch merchants arrive at her court. Trade routes shift. Muskets appear. Portuguese forts begin to crack. You watching it unfold realize Njinga isn't just playing defense anymore. She's dancing forward, each step calculated, each partner disposable. And all through this you see her court adapt. Children now learn both Portuguese and Kimbundu. rituals start incorporating foreign elements. Armies drill with both spears and European guns. Njinga's kingdom becomes a mirror one-side tradition, one-side transformation. But not everything bends smoothly. Rebellion simmers in the outer provinces. Loyalists to the old line grumble. Njinga answers the same way she always does, with charm or fire. Sometimes both in the same week. And through it all, she remains untouchable. Not just by brute strength, but by weaving herself into the very fabric of what the kingdom means now. You lean back as the fire burns low and listen to the silence around her compound, thick, measured, intentional. Even the insects seem to wait for her signal. Queen Njinga. Warrior diplomat myth. And the game has only just begun. There's something strange about how early morning smells in a war camp. Smoke from last night's fires still lingers. Damp grass whispers under your feet. Somewhere, a goat complains like it's seen too much. You walk past rows of Njinga's soldiers, some sharpening blades, others chanting quietly, faces painted for battle or faith or both. These aren't mercenaries or conscripts. These are believers. They follow a queen who rewrote the rules while everyone else was still memorizing them. You hear it from the scouts first. The Portuguese have taken more captives. Another village gone. More young boys loaded onto ships, more girls pulled into the grinding machine of the slave trade. This isn't a surprise. It's a pattern. You've seen it before. But Njinga. She's not done reacting yet. She's about to flip the board again. She calls a war council in her tent, a strange, fragrant space full of clashing worlds. There's a crucifix on one wall and a carved mask on the other. A stack of translated letters from Dutch allies next to a bowl of kola nuts and cowrie shells. Njinga listens. Her generals speak. The room vibrates with tension and mosquito hums. And then she speaks low and precise. They will burn the slave roads. And they do. You ride with them at dawn. Guerrilla warfare becomes her signature. This isn't about lining up on a sunny plain and waiting for trumpet blasts. This is ambushes in fog, spears from shadows, traps in dry riverbeds. Njinga turns the terrain into her accomplice. She memorizes Portuguese tactics and then twists them. You watch whole columns vanish into forest traps. Caravans hijacked. Forts suddenly cut off from supplies. Historians still argue whether this phase of warfare was coordinated brilliance or desperate improvisation. But what matters is that it worked. For a time, the Portuguese start to dread her name again. Rain Queen, some call her. The Panther. The one who never sleeps. In fact, here's a quirky tidbit. A Portuguese captain once wrote that she disguised herself as a man and infiltrated a fort in the night just to listen in on the officers. True, hard to say. But you can imagine it, Njinga leaning in from the shadows, memorizing accents and weaknesses while everyone assumes she's part of the help. But don't get too comfortable, because her enemies aren't sleeping either. After initial losses, the Portuguese regroup. They bring reinforcements from Brazil. They solidify alliances with rival African kingdoms, especially the Imbangala. And here's where it gets messy. The Imbangala are a lot. Imagine a band of nomadic warrior clans who take pride in chaos, known for their extreme discipline but also extreme brutality. Rumors swirl that they eat parts of fallen enemies to gain strength, that they raise children to be fighters by throwing them into death matches, that they worship war itself like a harvest. Do all these rumors hold up? Historians still debate. but the fear is real. And now the Portuguese are arming them. Njinga has a decision to make: fight them or recruit them. So what does she do? She meets with them. Alone. You arrive at the edge of a clearing and wait while she steps inside. No guards, no weapons, just diplomacy with a side of danger. And when she emerges hours later, she's not just unharmed, she's allied with them. Sort of. She promises land and influence. They promise troops. It's a fragile truce built on smoke and blood. Some call it brilliant. Others say it was her greatest mistake because it tied her fate to a group even more feared than the colonizers. But for now it works. Suddenly, Njinga's army is a stitched-together beast. Veterans from Ndongo warriors from the Imbangala, foreign advisors from the Dutch, and spiritual leaders whispering battle blessings in the old tongue. You feel the weight of it, marching past, rhythmic, unpredictable, dangerous. And then boom, war shifts. She launches a campaign against the Portuguese stronghold at Ambaca. This isn't some border scuffle. This is a direct threat to their stronghold inland, where they process slaves and store weapons. You scale the hills with her troops. She watches the fort from a distance, fingers wrapped around her rosary lips, moving in prayer or planning. It's hard to tell. Maybe both. The siege lasts days, then weeks. Rain falls in sheets. Mud swallows boots. Morale wavers. And then word from a scout: reinforcements are coming. Njinga has to retreat. Defeat. Not quite. She turns the retreat into a feint, drawing Portuguese forces deeper inland, away from supply routes. Then she strikes their camp at night. Chaos. Screams. Fire. She doesn't win the fort, but she wins the message. Still, you feel the cracks forming. The Dutch, after years of shaky alliance, begin to wobble. Their hold on Luanda weakens. European politics shift like a table with uneven legs. Njinga's once promising Protestant allies are now preoccupied, and her position starts to feel exposed. Back home, dissent grows. Some of her own chiefs question her Imbangala ties. They miss the old ways, the clean lines, the clear rules. Njinga, with her masks and muskets, rosaries, and rituals, makes them nervous. You sit by her fire one night, and for the first time she seems tired. Not broken, not finished, but undeniably weathered. She looks up at the stars and mutters, "If only they'd listen to the dead, we could avoid repeating them." And that's when she makes her boldest move yet. She shifts her base to Matamba. Matamba is another kingdom to the east of Ndongo, independent, rich in trade, strategically placed, and weak from leadership disputes. Njinga seizes it, not by war, by opportunity. A rival queen is ousted, and Njinga steps in, claims the throne, absorbs the land. Just like that, she isn't just Queen of Ndongo anymore, she's Queen of Matamba, too. That's not expansion, that's reinvention. You walk the new capital and see it happening in real time. New policies, new roads, a sudden influx of Dutch merchants, Congolese exiles, and Imbangala mercenaries. Njinga builds a new capital from the bones of an old one, and she does it fast. And that servant throne image, it echoes even louder now. In Matamba, they carve it into wood. It becomes a symbol, not of cruelty, of defiance, of elevation. No one denies her a chair again, but if they did well, she'd probably turn them into the next footstool of history. The air in Matamba hums differently. You notice it the moment your feet cross into the new capital. It's denser somehow, heavy with incense and ambition. The markets buzz with a blend of Kimbundu Portuguese and Dutch, the smell of roasted cassava mixing with the sharp tang of musket oil. Queen Njinga is no longer defending a shrinking kingdom, she's orchestrating a comeback. From her new seat in Matamba, she doesn't just rule. She performs. Every public appearance is deliberate. The robes are richer, the ceremonies longer. She has stepped fully into the role of both monarch and myth. And behind the velvet and war paint, she's laying the foundations of a new empire. You're there when she drafts a letter to the King of Portugal, yes, the actual king. The tone is pointed but polite. She offers peace, again. She's always offering peace, but never for free. She wants recognition, a formal alliance, trade rights, legitimacy. And she writes it with a diplomat's quill and a warrior's patience. Because she knows this letter isn't just paper, it's bait. While she waits for a response, Njinga sets to work rebuilding Matamba from its ashes. You wander through her redesigned court, a bizarre fusion of European pomp and local tradition. There's a diplomatic hall with polished chairs and stained glass windows where Dutch merchants shuffle awkwardly beside barefoot village elders. And in the next room, griots sing ancestral songs over the drone of spinning wheels, making fabric for Njinga's new uniforms. Military reform begins again, this time with even greater urgency. The Dutch might flake. The Portuguese might strike. So Njinga blends her forces veterans from Ndongo, fresh recruits from Matamba, mercenaries from distant tribes. She divides her army into units led by commanders loyal not to their kin, but to her directly. The chain of command shortens. Response time tightens. Training drills become brutal. One fringe tidbit that slips through the cracks of official records, Njinga was said to organize sparring matches in full view of the court, placing bets on her warriors. Some accounts claim she once stepped into the ring herself just to prove she could still take down a soldier half her age. Truth, maybe. But you can feel the energy of it echoing in her court like a dare no one ever fully declined. Outside, Matamba, her scouts spread like wind. She wants to know what crops are failing in the east, which Portuguese garrison has low morale, which chief is quietly stashing powder. You ride with them one evening and realize her intelligence network is vast, more whisper than structure, but deadly efficient. A passing child might be carrying a code wrapped in banana leaves. A farmer might double as a spy. Historians still argue whether Njinga had a formal spy ring or just 1,000 frightened but loyal informants. But one thing's clear, she always knows more than her enemies expect. And then, finally, a reply from Portugal. Disappointing, dismissive, almost mocking. They offer a reduced truce conditional on total surrender. Njinga reads it in silence, then burns it. Not out of rage, out of strategy. No one sees her lose composure. Not ever. Instead, she leans harder into diplomacy, but this time on her terms. She sends emissaries to neighboring kingdoms, forms trade agreements with inland copper-rich chiefdoms. She even opens tentative discussions with the Pope, trying to maneuver her way back into Catholic good graces, not because she's had a spiritual epiphany, but because papal favor might equal protection from European aggression. And now the stories start to shift. You hear a Portuguese commander in Luanda call her the most dangerous woman in Africa. You hear a Dutch trader whisper that she's a better negotiator than anyone in Amsterdam. You hear elders in the countryside tell bedtime stories about how Njinga can fly or speak to lions or never die. You see her power stretch beyond borders, and with it, her image expands too. She is no longer just the ruler of Ndongo and Matamba. She's Queen Njinga, sovereign of self-made legend. One particularly odd ritual catches your attention in formal ceremonies. She starts referring to herself as king, not queen. She wears male military garb, sits with her legs apart, and expects to be addressed with masculine pronouns. Is it symbolic, strategic? Maybe both. Scholars still debate whether this was a spiritual transition, a political maneuver, or a social commentary decades ahead of its time. But within her court, no one questions it. Njinga is king. Njinga is queen. Njinga is whoever she says she is. And let's not forget her court culture. It's vibrant, eclectic, and deeply political. She hosts poetry contests where verses double as political commentary. Foreign guests are required to present both a gift and a proverb. And she reintroduces strict etiquette. All guests must lower their eyes. No one sits unless invited. When she walks in, even foreign dignitaries stand not out of protocol, but because they're a little scared of what happens if they don't. It's around this time you start noticing changes in Njinga's circle. Some old advisors fade into the background. New faces appear younger, sharper, more radical. You catch whispers that Njinga is preparing for something big. Maybe one final strike, maybe another treaty on better terms. But it all starts to feel like she's tightening a rope, slowly, silently, around someone's neck. And then she shocks everyone again. She frees hundreds of enslaved people in Matamba and resettles them as free citizens. Not as laborers, not as soldiers, as citizens, with land, with status. Her goal to build loyalty, but also to send a message. To Portugal, your stolen people return home. To her people, you're not commodities here. To history, Njinga writes her own chapters. You sit by her that night as she listens to drums echo through Matamba's hills. She barely speaks, just sips palm wine, her eyes lost in firelight. Maybe she's thinking of the battles still to come. Maybe she's thinking of the family she's lost: her father, her brother, her nephew. Maybe she's imagining how long her name will linger after she's gone. But one thing's certain, Matamba now breathes with her rhythm, and the world is watching. Matamba glows by torchlight tonight. Smoke curls gently above thatched rooftops, a breeze sifts through tall grasses, and someone far off is humming a lullaby in a language older than the Portuguese ever imagined. You walk softly, almost forgetting that outside these borders, enemies are always calculating. Inside the capital, though Njinga's hand is steady, her moves exact. Still, peace-like rest is a rare commodity in her world. Njinga has barely caught her breath from restructuring Matamba when Luanda, the glittering Portuguese stronghold, begins to stir again. There's new leadership, more aggressive. Fresh muskets arriving from Brazil, and whispers of a plan to reclaim Ndongo permanently. You hear the word crusade tossed around, as if this is still about faith, not profit. As if any of this was ever holy. So Njinga doesn't wait. She acts. She sends word to the Dutch. They've been cagey lately, slippery in their promises, more concerned with trade routes than oaths. But Njinga leans into their discomfort, offers them prime trading posts, tax relief, and safe passage through Matamba in exchange for real support. Cannons, powder ships. Everything she'll need to take back Luanda. Here's where history gets sticky. Some scholars argue that the Dutch alliance never went further than a few barrels of gunpowder and half-hearted handshakes. Others insist Njinga was promised full military backing in return for her strategic position inland. The truth, as always, likely lives in the cracks between contracts and cannonballs. Regardless, she moves. You march with her army, a breathtaking column of men, women, and teens, dressed in war cloth painted with symbols of ancestors, carrying everything from muskets to clubs to bows that haven't changed in centuries. Njinga rides near the front in armor, polished to a black sheen. Around her neck a rosary dangles alongside a leopard tooth. Your destination, Luanda. Not to raise it, to reclaim it. But the journey isn't quick. The Portuguese have fortified every inch of the road west. And they've poisoned it too. You see it in the poisoned wells, the empty villages, the scorched food stores. The kind of defense strategy that isn't just about winning, it's about punishing. Njinga adapts. Again. She breaks her army into smaller cells. They spread out like oil across cloth, infiltrating, surviving, reuniting by moonlight. You walk for days without a clear horizon, sometimes sleeping in the roots of ancient baobabs, other times nestled between thorn thickets while rain falls like drumming fingers on your back. And then one night you reach a clearing. Torches ahead. Portuguese flags. Luanda is closer than it's ever been. Njinga doesn't rush in. She never does. She studies, probes, sends decoys, sets fires to draw them out. There's one fringe tale from this campaign that always makes the rounds. Supposedly Njinga ordered women from her army to dress as ghostly spirits and parade outside the Portuguese forts at night, chanting spells and throwing powder into the wind. Were the Portuguese spooked? Some accounts say entire units refused to leave their quarters the next day. You'll never know how much of that is real. But it sure makes for a vivid visual. Still, despite all her tactics, the siege of Luanda stalls. The Dutch fail to show up with the expected firepower. The Portuguese dig in. Rain begins to fall daily, heavy and relentless, turning the red soil to thick, sucking sludge. Supplies thin. Morale buckles. Soldiers begin to mutter in private. And that's when she makes her hardest choice. She retreats, not out of weakness, out of strategy. She knows when the ground stops working for her. She also knows when her allies stop being allies. The Dutch fickle, the weather cursed, the Portuguese too stubborn for a clean fight. You march back east, your legs aching, your boots ruined. But Njinga doesn't sag. If anything, her spine seems straighter. She keeps one hand on her sword, and the other gripping prayer beads as if daring God and generals alike to question her next move. And what is that next move? Consolidation. A word that sounds boring but is deadlier than any blade. Back in Matamba, she doesn't stew. She solidifies. Forts are repaired. Roads cleared. Her army retrained. And, most critically, she starts crafting the narrative. Njinga isn't a failed conqueror. She's a queen who outlasted another storm. She orders new ceremonies. Huge public rituals honoring those who fell during the campaign. Names are recited. Spirits are thanked. Survivors are honored. And you start to notice something important. She's not just building a kingdom anymore. She's building legacy. You're there when she begins commissioning her story. Paintings, oral poems, wood carvings, even a woven tapestry depicting her negotiation with the Portuguese decades ago, complete with the infamous human chair. She doesn't hide the brutality. She immortalizes it, turns it into theater, into history, into a symbol. And then something wild happens. The Portuguese offer peace. Real peace. It's not driven by morality. It's driven by exhaustion. They've spent decades trying to crush her, and she just keeps coming back. Their colonies are fragile. Their traders restless. And Njinga now controls inland trade routes they can't access without her blessing. So they sit down with her. Again. You're in the room when it happens. She arrives in full royal dress, half Christian, half traditional, the kind of outfit that makes bishops blink twice. She speaks Portuguese fluently. She quotes scripture and old treaties. She flatters and cuts in the same sentence. And this time she wins. They agree to recognize her sovereignty. Matamba and Ndongo as one realm. She agrees to re-embrace Christianity publicly, a move she wields like a paper shield. And she wins trade rights. Arms. Status. Historians still puzzle over how much this peace benefited her people materially versus politically. But one thing is undeniable. Queen Njinga, the warrior who once ruled from the forest with nothing but smoke and grit, is now formally recognized as a sovereign ruler by one of the biggest colonial empires of her time. You walk with her through Matamba. Days later, the treaty still drying in ink. Children run alongside, giggling and mimicking her walk. Old women spit on the ground and whisper blessings. Drummers follow her, beating a rhythm that sounds a little like revenge finally exhaling. And Njinga. She doesn't smile. Not really. But her eyes, sharp, clear, calm, tell you that for now she has everything she needs. The seasons turn in Matamba, and so do the pages of power. You wake to quieter mornings now. Fewer battle drills, fewer messengers thundering through the gates. Fewer nights spent staring into firelight, wondering who will betray whom next. But quiet doesn't mean idle. Njinga never sleeps on peace. She just sharpens it like a blade. Now that the Portuguese treaty has cooled the air, Njinga turns inward. Not to rest, please, she wouldn't dare, but to rule. You find her most days pacing through the palace garden, speaking softly to advisors asking about tax collection in distant villages, or whether the new irrigation project in the southern provinces is actually keeping cassava fields from drying up. And the garden. It's no casual stroll. This place is curated like a library. Medicinal herbs from Angola's deepest jungles. Palm trees brought in from coastal trade. There's even one corner quiet and shaded where she's planted a tree rumored to have grown from the grave of her sister Kifunji, the one sacrificed years ago for stability. Whether that's myth or memory, Njinga lets it grow unchecked. You overhear her more often speaking in metaphors. Now, power is a seed, she says once, handing a mango to a visiting chief. But fruit needs patience and shade, and silence. The chief smiles. You can't tell if he gets it. Her palace expands during these years, not just in size but in function. A new hall is built to host legal proceedings, another for foreign visitors. She even commissions rooms for artists, weavers, and storytellers. She wants to preserve everything, battles, proverbs, architectural designs, even favorite recipes. Not for vanity, for continuity. As if she knows her story has moved from survival to legacy. And yet despite the diplomatic triumphs, not everyone within her orbit is loyal. One night you hear murmurs, accusations of conspiracy. A mid-level military commander was caught meeting with Portuguese traders without approval. He claims it was just a misunderstanding, but Njinga isn't convinced. The next morning he vanishes. No trial, no body. Just an empty seat at the royal meal. Fringe rumor suggests that Njinga kept a personal list, a mental roster of enemies and future threats. Not written down, of course, just carried quietly behind her eyes. One wrong move and she'd recall your name with terrifying accuracy. Historians still debate whether this paranoia was a result of trauma or sheer political genius. Probably both. Still her most impressive feat during this stretch governance. Matamba doesn't just survive, it flourishes. Njinga implements a tax system complex but fair. Chiefs are given land in exchange for loyalty, not bloodline. Trade caravans move smoothly across newly protected routes, bringing copper, ivory, raffia cloth, and, yes, still slaves. It's a brutal reality she doesn't erase, only controls more tightly now. Less chaos, more order. And let's talk about her justice system because, wow, it's peculiar. You witness a trial where a thief is asked not to pay a fine, but to spend 30 days serving the community elders, cooking, and repairing roofs. On another occasion, a nobleman accused of treason is given a choice exile or public shame via ritual dance in front of the entire village square. He chooses exile. Can't imagine why. Njinga blends traditional Kimbundu law with ideas she's picked up from the Portuguese legal structure. Appeals, witness testimonies. A council of elders and advisors all trained by her to spot deception and keep judgment communal, not dictatorial. She doesn't want to be seen as a tyrant. She wants to be remembered as just. Fearsome, yes, but fair. She even starts grooming successors. Now here's where it gets a little awkward. Because Njinga, for all her strategic brilliance, has no biological children. Some say she was sterile from years of hardship and poison. Others claim she chose not to bear children, fearing that motherhood would weaken her image as a kingly ruler. Historians argue whether this was a calculated sacrifice or simply fate. Again, maybe both. So she adopts. Several young relatives, nieces, and distant cousins are brought to court trained in politics, battle diplomacy, and decorum. One, a girl named Barbara, begins to stand out. Sharp-tongued, witty, a gifted speaker. She carries herself like someone twice her age and reportedly once beat a grown man in a sword duel just to prove a point. Njinga smiles more around her. You start to wonder if she sees something of her younger self there before the poisonings, before the betrayals, before she sat on a man's back to negotiate her first treaty. At the same time, Njinga continues her strange dance with Catholicism. She's rebaptized. Again. Attends church mass. Builds a chapel near the palace. But you notice her traditional spiritual advisors are still ever present. She makes offerings to both the saints and the ancestors, sometimes within the same hour. When asked about this, she reportedly shrugged and said, "All gods listen if you speak well." Modern scholars still scratch their heads over this duality. Was she devout, cynical, playing both sides? Your guess is as good as theirs. But the people, they love it. They understand. Because they've always lived in both worlds, the colonized and the sacred, the imported and the indigenous. Njinga just names it out loud. Trade flourishes now. With peace secured, foreign merchants flood Matamba. Dutch Italians, Brazilians, even reluctant Portuguese. They arrive hoping for ivory and leave with contracts signed in the Queen's private court. She insists on personal audiences with high-ranking visitors, and her reputation makes even seasoned merchants nervous. You watch one Dutch emissary try to out-negotiate her. He walks in arrogant and leaves pale minus half his silver and any sense of superiority. Njinga just sips her palm wine and hums softly, tapping her fingers against the throne, not the human one this time, a carved ebony chair inlaid with gold and polished smooth by decades of hard decisions. And through it all, she begins shaping her image for history, wood carvings, murals, performances that depict key moments of her life real embellished. Who's to say there's one story she especially favors, the tale of the crocodile that tried to eat her as a girl, and how she stabbed it in the eye with a palm frond. Was it true? Probably not. But it doesn't matter. It's hers now. In your dreams, you hear that crocodile still thrashing somewhere far beneath the surface. The air smells different these days. Thicker with incense, quieter with reverence. You walk past rows of sentries who no longer flinch at every rustle in the underbrush. Matamba is no longer just a stronghold. It's an institution. And Njinga. She's moved from warrior queen to something more formidable, a living legend. She's older now. Her gait, while proud, carries the weight of decades spent in the chokehold of empire building. You see the lines in her face deepen not just from age, but from memory. She's still sharp. Don't let the soft-spoken greetings fool you. But her priorities have shifted. Less conquering, more legacy. She spends long hours in court now, not on battlefields. Her throne room becomes a stage for policy diplomacy, and the occasional ritual drama reenacting her greatest hits. There's even a regular Njinga Day, where actors in hand-woven costumes perform her most daring escapes, political negotiations, and, yes, every year without fail, the infamous servant's back moment. A crowd favorite, somehow both grim and hilarious. You can't help but notice, though, a certain tension creeping back in, because with peace comes succession. And succession, especially for someone as singular as Njinga, is always messy. Her adopted heir, Barbara, is coming into her own confident, poised diplomatic. But you hear hushed debates among the nobles. Can anyone truly fill Njinga's shoes? Should Matamba be led by another woman? Should they rejoin the old Kimbundu royal bloodlines? The whispers grow louder with each week winding through palace corridors like vines. Njinga, for her part, says little publicly, but she spends more time with Barbara, coaching, watching, testing, sometimes with praise, sometimes with cutting silence that says more than words. One morning, you catch a glimpse of the two of them sparring not with swords, but with questions. If the Portuguese demand Matamba's grain, Njinga asks, "What do you give them?" Barbara doesn't flinch. Their own gold just long enough to make them think they've won. Njinga just nods. No smile, but no correction either. Meanwhile, religious politics keep stirring the pot. Njinga continues her elaborate dance between Christianity and traditional spirituality. She builds a small convent, invites European nuns to train local women, but she also funds temple restorations and appears at full moon ancestral ceremonies. Some of her closest advisors begin to bristle. One Portuguese friar complains that she defiles her soul with charms. Njinga's reply: "Then I suppose God should speak louder." Historians still debate whether her faith was sincere, opportunistic, or simply flexible. And again, the answer is yes. And what about the outside world? It doesn't go away just because Njinga holds the border steady. The Portuguese still push, still maneuver, still whisper offers into the ears of lesser chiefs. The Dutch fade in importance as Europe's alliances shift. And inland rival groups watch Matamba's growing wealth with hungry eyes. Njinga answers not with war, but with paperwork. She sends ambassadors, signs, treaties, sponsors marriages. There's one bizarre case where she convinces two feuding villages to settle a land dispute through a wrestling match, best of 3. The winner receives both farmland and a royal feast. You're there to watch it, sweaty, messy, and far more effective than yet another skirmish. In her quieter moments, Njinga turns to writing, or at least dictating. Letters, speeches, philosophical musings. She drafts a series of memoirs, although they read more like sermons crossed with battle logs. You hear lines like, "To bend is not to break, and to break is not to end." Or, "A queen who eats alone dies alone." You wonder if she's writing for herself or for the world after her. Probably both. Always both. There's a fringe story whispered among younger palace aides one night. Njinga had a vivid dream in which she met her past self, younger and blood-covered, staring into a river. The two versions argued. The older one said, "You must let go." The younger one shouted, "You must not forget." Whether that dream ever happened, no one knows. But the story feels true, which for Njinga is close enough. You start noticing small rituals in her daily routine. She visits the grave of her sister once a week now. She leaves salt. She walks barefoot. Sometimes she sings a lullaby in a language even the elders strain to recognize. And yet Njinga is no fading monarch. She still receives envoys with spine. One awkward young Portuguese emissary tries to lecture her on trade compliance, and she interrupts him mid-sentence to ask if he's ever seen a real lion. When he stutters, she waves her hand and says, "Then stop pretending you've ruled one." You hear of one final peace treaty. She oversees a particularly delicate agreement between 3 warring clans in the northeast. Njinga doesn't just broker the peace, she demands each side give up their firstborn for diplomatic training in Matamba. It's bold, maybe audacious, but it works. Within a year, the borderlands stabilize. There's one last debate among historians here: was Njinga building an empire or a sanctuary? Some argue she wanted a model kingdom, a permanent legacy. Others believe she was just trying to carve out a place where her people wouldn't have to choose between survival and identity. As always with Njinga, it's probably both. And slowly, over the years, you see fewer soldiers and more scribes. Fewer spears, more ink pots. You hear children laughing in the palace courtyard, playing a game where they pretend to be Njinga. One shouts, "I sit on your back because you offered no chair." The others collapse into giggles. Even the Portuguese begin to soften. They refer to her as Queen of Matamba and Ndongo, in their reports now not as a rebel or usurper. Letters from Lisbon mention her with an odd mix of fear and admiration, like writing about a lioness who's decided mercifully not to bite. Njinga's palace becomes a pilgrimage site. Young rulers from neighboring regions come to study her methods. Women arrive asking for advice. Foreign missionaries seek interviews. Everyone wants to know, how did she do it? She gives no singular answer. Just a slight smile, a sip of palm wine, and a cryptic line like crocodiles wait years to strike. Queens wait longer. You feel it now, the closing of something. The gears slow. The drums quiet. The flame doesn't flicker. It banks, glowing, steady. Njinga doesn't stop moving, but she begins to step lighter. As though she knows the world will carry her forward even when she stops walking. The twilight of Njinga's reign is a slow unfolding, like the fading of a sunset rather than a sudden nightfall. You sense a shift in the air, the kind you don't quite catch at first, but once it's there, you can't ignore it. The queen, who once barreled through life like a thunderstorm, now moves with the grace of a river's current, steady patient, impossible to predict. Her body shows the years. She walks with a slight limp now, an old wound from a skirmish no one ever mentions anymore. The battle scars have softened beneath her skin, but her eyes still hold the fire of 1,000 suns. Those eyes have seen betrayals, triumphs, sacrifices, and the unending weight of a crown that never truly rests. You find yourself in the palace more often these days, watching the rhythm of daily life that Njinga orchestrates like a conductor with invisible hands. Courtiers whisper about her morning rituals, meditation mixed with traditional blessings, a palm leaf fan fluttering to keep away the flies, and the gentle sips of a drink brewed from local herbs said to ease the mind and body. One gossip claims it's a secret recipe passed down from an ancient priestess, while another swears it's just hot water with a squeeze of wild lime. Historians still argue what it really was. Njinga holds court with the same sharp wit and commanding presence as ever. But now she listens more. You see her leaning in, nodding thoughtfully, asking questions that reveal not just interest but genuine care. A farmer worried about drought, a merchant struggling with new taxes, a young mother seeking advice on education, all are met with an attentive ear. She's transformed from a warrior queen to a wise ruler, someone who understands that power isn't just about conquest, but about nurturing the roots beneath her feet. There's a peculiar charm to her diplomacy at this stage. She favors subtlety over spectacle, soft words over harsh decrees. One morning, she invites a delegation of Portuguese traders to a traditional feast, where instead of swords or treaties, they exchange stories and songs. It's a deliberate move, a reminder that culture can be as powerful as any army. Some of the traders leave deeply moved, others just confused. Njinga smiles at their bewilderment. Understanding, she murmurs, is the greatest victory. The palace gardens bloom spectacularly this season, bursting with vibrant flowers and fragrant herbs. Njinga often strolls through the rows of hibiscus and frangipani, her fingers brushing petals as if drawing strength from their resilience. You remember the garden from years ago where she once spoke of power as a seed needing patience. Now it feels like a living metaphor, the blossoming proof of her reign. But the world beyond Matamba's borders is not so serene. Rumors of growing unrest and shifting alliances drift in on the wind. The Portuguese continue their relentless push, subtly undermining local leaders with bribes and promises. Neighboring kingdoms watch Matamba with envy and suspicion. Njinga's diplomatic web is tested, daily strands fraying, but never breaking. You witness a rare moment of tension when a rebellious chief from a neighboring region demands a meeting. He's brash and impatient, challenging Njinga's authority with blunt threats. She listens quietly, then responds, not with anger, but with a tale from her youth, a story about a crocodile and a servant's back, a lesson in humility and cunning. The chief's bravado falters, and by the end of the day, he's not only pacified, but offers a tentative alliance. Stories like these fuel the legend, of course. Whether they happened exactly as told is uncertain, but they capture the essence of Njinga's leadership, fierce yet thoughtful, commanding yet compassionate. As her reign winds down, Njinga invests more in education and culture, commissioning scribes to record histories, poets to celebrate Matamba's heritage, and artisans to craft symbols of unity. She understands that kingdoms are not just built on walls and armies, but on stories and identity. Yet, even with all this preparation, the question of succession looms larger. Barbara, her chosen heir, grows stronger and more confident, but opposition remains. Some nobles resent a woman ascending the throne. Others fear change itself. Njinga navigates these waters with care, often stepping in personally to mediate disputes or broker compromises. In private moments, you catch glimpses of Njinga's vulnerabilities, a rare sigh, a distant look, a hand pressed to her chest as if holding back the weight of the years. But such moments are fleeting, quickly replaced by the formidable presence that has defined her life. Historians debate whether these final years were a time of peaceful consolidation or quiet preparation for inevitable conflict. Some argue Njinga was building a lasting peace. Others suggest she was merely delaying the storm. Like much of her life, the truth is layered and complex, and as you sit beside the fading embers of a campfire one evening, listening to the soft murmur of the night, you realize that Njinga's story is not just about battles and treaties. It's about resilience, adaptation, and the power of legacy, a story that lingers long after the throne's shadow fades. The years edge toward their twilight, and you sense the slow weaving of an ending in the fabric of Njinga's reign. The queen who once roared across battlefields now commands with a quieter, deeper authority. You watch her move through the palace, her presence still electric but tempered by time's steady hand. You notice the changing rhythms of court life. Njinga spends more time surrounded by trusted advisors, women and men alike, who help manage the kingdom's complex affairs. These are not mere figureheads. They are sharp minds versed in diplomacy, law, and trade. Njinga has cultivated this council, carefully balancing traditional power structures with her own vision for a stable Matamba. It's fascinating how she melds the old and new. On one day, she oversees a ritual offering to ancestral spirits, complete with drumming and dance invoking protection and prosperity. The next, she receives letters sealed with European wax negotiating trade rights or peace treaties. The blend of traditions is seamless, a reflection of the world Njinga inhabits, one foot in her ancestors' soil, the other stepping toward the uncertain future. You overhear court gossip about Njinga's health. Some whisper that her strength is fading, that she moves slower, speaks less. Yet when she addresses a crowd, she still commands awe and respect. Her voice carries the weight of history, a reminder that she remains the heart of Matamba's identity. In this period, Njinga's relationship with religion deepens, but remains complex. She attends Christian services with increased regularity, yet she never abandons the traditional rituals that connect her to the land and her people. There's a curious tension in this dual faith, sometimes harmonious, sometimes contradictory. Some priests express frustration, others seem to admire her pragmatism. You catch a conversation where a Jesuit missionary debates with a local priest, both puzzled over whether Njinga's faith is genuine or political. Historians today still ponder this question with no definitive answer. Trade flourishes under her careful eye. Matamba becomes a hub for goods moving between the interior and the coast. Copper, ivory, cloth, and unfortunately enslaved people continue to be commodities, a dark stain on an otherwise remarkable reign. Njinga manages these transactions with a keen sense of control, ensuring Matamba benefits and remains sovereign amid European encroachment. You witness a telling scene where Njinga meets with a delegation of Portuguese traders. The air is thick with tension and polite smiles. One emissary offers her gifts, fine textiles, firearms, and wine, attempting to curry favor. Njinga accepts them with a cool nod, but reminds them sharply that Matamba's sovereignty is non-negotiable. "You may bring gifts," she says, "but the throne is not for sale." It's a masterstroke of diplomacy, and word of it spreads quickly. You see Njinga mentor Barbara more intently. The young woman is no longer just an adopted daughter, but a formidable leader in her own right. Barbara absorbs lessons on statecraft military strategy and negotiation with eagerness. Their relationship is complex, mixing affection, rivalry, and mutual respect. In private moments, Njinga confides hopes and fears about Barbara's future, aware of the challenges a woman ruler will face in a male-dominated world. Court intrigues simmer beneath the surface. Njinga's enemies, both internal and external, plot quietly. You overhear whispers of discontent among nobles who chafe at her reforms or her favoritism toward Barbara. There are rumors of assassination attempts, though none ever come close. Njinga's vigilance is legendary. She trusts few and watches all. One curious episode involves a mysterious foreign visitor, an envoy from a distant kingdom whose people practice strange customs. Njinga entertains him with curiosity, asking questions about his homeland's governance and religion. Their exchange is cordial but cautious. Some palace elders view the visitor with suspicion, fearing espionage. Njinga dismisses their fears with a smile. Knowledge is the sharpest weapon. The palace itself becomes a symbol of her reign, grand yet functional. New wings are added libraries filled with scrolls and manuscripts, and spaces designated for cultural events. You attend one such event where poets recite epic tales of Njinga's battles victories, and cunning their voices rising and falling like the tides. The crowd is entranced, and you feel the weight of history settling into story. Njinga's health fluctuates. There are days when she seems almost invincible, and others when she retreats behind closed doors attended by her closest confidants and healers. Traditional medicine mingles with European remedies, a testament to her blended world. Through it all, Njinga remains fiercely independent. She rejects offers to move to the coast or to European settlements, insisting that her place is with her people on her land. This stubbornness earns admiration and frustration alike. You begin to sense the inevitability of change. Njinga's time is drawing near its close, but the kingdom she forged stands resilient, rooted in her vision shaped by her hands. The future is uncertain, but the foundation is strong. Historians argue over her legacy. Is she a pioneer of African resistance, a pragmatic ruler navigating impossible odds, or a complex figure marked by contradictions? Perhaps she is all these things wrapped in one formidable queen. As the sun dips lower, you hear the soft murmur of the palace settling for the night. Njinga's story is far from over, but this chapter is closing with quiet dignity. The quiet gravity of Njinga's final years begins to settle around you like a thick, warm blanket. You walk through the palace halls and sense the shift, not the fading of a queen, but the careful passing of a torch. The tension between past and future hums beneath every conversation, every guarded glance. Barbara's role grows increasingly central. She's no longer just Njinga's shadow, but her chosen heir, absorbing lessons like a sponge, and demonstrating a knack for both diplomacy and strategy. You watch them together, the Queen's steady guidance paired with Barbara's eager energy. It's a fragile balance, like two dancers rehearsing a complex duet where one leads, but both must be in perfect sync. The palace buzzes with preparation. Advisors debate succession plans, nobles jockey for influence, and foreign emissaries watch closely. Some view Barbara as a fresh start. Others doubt her strength to hold the kingdom together. Njinga, however, appears unshaken, her confidence in Barbara unwavering, even when the court murmurs doubt. You overhear a heated discussion where a skeptical noble argues. A woman on the throne invites chaos. Njinga interrupts calmly. A woman has held this throne through war and peace alike. Do you doubt the strength of the crown or the courage of its bearer? The room falls silent. That quiet confidence, that command is Njinga's enduring legacy. But it's not all politics. Njinga's private moments reveal a woman grappling with mortality. You catch glimpses of her walking the palace gardens at dusk, touching the flowers with reverence, whispering thanks to the spirits. One night, she confides in a trusted attendant, "I have worn many skins, warrior, diplomat, mother, queen. Soon I must wear the skin of memory." The kingdom itself hums with change. Trade routes flourish, new alliances form, and cultural life thrives. Yet shadows linger, the ongoing threat of European encroachment, internal tensions, and the dark cloud of the slave trade. Njinga navigates these waters with cautious pragmatism, sometimes pushing back fiercely, other times conceding small pieces to safeguard the whole. You witness a powerful moment when Njinga hosts a meeting between rival chiefs. Instead of swords or threats, she offers them a shared cup of palm wine, sealing a pact of peace. The chiefs exchange wary glances, but eventually nod. It's a small victory, but in Njinga's world, small victories are everything. Her faith remains a blend of old and new. You see her lighting candles in a chapel one day, and offering kola nuts at a shrine the next. This duality confuses some, but defines her. She's a queen who refuses to be boxed in, embodying the fluidity of belief in a time of great change. You hear whispered stories of Njinga's dreams, visions where past and future collide. In one, she walks through a forest of ancestors, each figure nodding in approval. In another, she sees Barbara seated firmly on the throne, the kingdom thriving. Whether these dreams are prophecy or wishful thinking, they offer a glimpse into her inner world. As her strength wanes, Njinga spends more time writing and dictating her thoughts. These writings, part memoir, part counsel, reveal a ruler reflecting deeply on power, identity, and survival. She writes, "A throne built on backs is heavy, but a throne built on hearts endures." Historians debate the accuracy of these writings, some suggesting they were shaped by later scribes, others believing they reveal her true voice. Either way, they add a rich layer to her complex legacy. The Queen's final public appearances are moments of profound symbolism. She walks through markets, greeting citizens with a smile that carries the weight of decades. At festivals, she dances briefly, the firelight flickering across her face, a reminder that beneath the crown is a woman who once defied impossible odds. One evening, as you stand near her chambers, you hear her voice, soft but resolute, reciting a poem about rivers that carve valleys slowly but surely. It's a fitting metaphor for her reign, persistent, patient, and ultimately transformative. As the night deepens, you feel the quiet power of a legacy nearing completion. Njinga's story is not ending in defeat, but evolving into legend, a testament to resilience and adaptation. The air grows heavy with anticipation and a hint of sorrow as Njinga's final days approach. You feel it in the way the palace quiets, how even the usual bustle of servants and courtiers softens into respectful hushes. It's as if everyone senses the gravity of this chapter drawing to a close. Njinga herself moves with a deliberate calm, her usual fiery spirit tempered by reflection. You watch her from a distance, sitting quietly in her chamber, surrounded by artifacts of her life: carved wooden statues, intricate beadwork, and worn battle gear. These objects seem to hold the weight of her years, silent witnesses to the triumphs and struggles that shaped her. Barbara is near constantly now, her presence a steadying force. The two women share moments of laughter, strategy, and tenderness, an unspoken understanding passing between them. You notice Barbara's hands tremble slightly as she listens to Njinga's stories of old wars and secret alliances, realizing the immense responsibility soon to rest on her shoulders. Njinga's health declines visibly. The limp is more pronounced, her voice softer. Yet there's no resignation in her eyes, only the fierce determination that has defined her life. She insists on holding court when possible, her commands sharp, her mind clear. The kingdom does not sleep because its queen weakens, she declares one afternoon, eliciting murmurs of awe. The palace physicians and healers work tirelessly, blending traditional remedies with European medicines. There's a curious mix of hope and inevitability in their care. You overhear a healer describe Njinga's condition as the slow retreat of a great storm, a poetic but somber phrase that lingers. In this period, Njinga reflects deeply on the nature of power and legacy. You find her writing again, her hand steadier in these final pages. She muses on the throne made of a servant's back, a metaphor that has haunted her reign. She acknowledges the paradox of leadership, the need for strength sometimes harsh, balanced with compassion and justice. The queen's relationships with her people deepen in these moments. She meets common folk in the market, listens to their stories, laughs at children's jokes, and blesses newborns. Her presence is a balm to many, a reminder that despite the weight of empire, she remains connected to those she serves. Outside the palace walls, the kingdom feels the ripple of her impending absence. Nobles prepare alliances, shift, and whispers of uncertainty spread. Yet there's also a quiet pride. Matamba has endured a beacon of resistance and culture in a changing world. One evening, Njinga gathers her closest advisors and Barbara in a private chamber. She speaks candidly about the future, urging unity and vigilance. "The throne is not mine alone," she says, "but a flame we must protect together." Her words resonate deeply, a final charge to those who will carry on. Historians debate the exact circumstances of her passing. Some accounts speak of a peaceful death surrounded by loved ones. Others suggest a sudden decline. The truth, like much of her life, is layered in mystery and legend. After her death, Barbara ascends to the throne amid a mixture of celebration and tension. Njinga's legacy shapes her reign, a foundation both solid and challenging. You sense the echoes of the queen's spirit guiding the new ruler through uncharted waters. Njinga's story, while ending here in a physical sense, lives on vividly in the hearts and minds of her people, and now in yours. Her throne, made from the back of a servant, yet held with unmatched dignity, symbolizes a complex dance of power, resilience, and humanity. As night deepens, you feel a profound stillness, a moment suspended between history and myth. Njinga's journey is complete, but her story whispers on an invitation to remember, reflect, and dream. The echoes of Njinga's reign ripple outward, reaching beyond the palace walls and the borders of Matamba. You find yourself tracing these waves through the shifting sands of time, watching how her story spreads and transforms in the years and centuries that follow. It's a tale told in hushed reverence, shouted in battle cries and debated in scholarly halls. And Njinga's memory becomes a symbol not just of resistance to colonial powers, but of African sovereignty and strength. You notice how her image evolves, sometimes mythologized as a warrior queen with supernatural powers, other times scrutinized as a political pragmatist navigating impossible odds. These varying portrayals reveal as much about those telling the story as about Njinga herself. In the region, her legacy shapes the identity of the people of Angola and beyond. You hear oral histories, songs and dances dedicated to her courage and wisdom. These cultural expressions keep her spirit alive, offering comfort and inspiration to generations facing their own challenges. The throne she once held, crafted in the shadow of a servant's sacrifice, becomes a potent metaphor in discussions about power, justice, and leadership. It challenges simplistic narratives and forces a reckoning with the complexities of history, where glory and hardship intertwine. You come across a surprising detail. Njinga's story was suppressed or altered at times, depending on who held power. European colonizers often downplayed her achievements or twisted her image to fit their agendas. Conversely, post-colonial movements reclaimed her as a symbol of African pride and resistance. This tug-of-war over her legacy speaks to the ongoing struggle over history itself. Modern historians still debate many aspects of Njinga's life, from the exact nature of her religious beliefs to the motivations behind her alliances and conflicts. Some argue she was primarily a shrewd politician. Others see her as a visionary leader ahead of her time. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, wrapped in layers of nuance and contradiction. You realize that Njinga's story challenges you to think differently about power. It's not a simple tale of heroism or villainy, but a complex dance of survival adaptation and resilience in a turbulent world. Her throne, once literally made from the back of a servant, now stands symbolically as a reminder that leadership is always built on the efforts, sacrifices, and struggles of many. This realization invites you to consider the cost of power and the responsibilities it carries. As you reflect on Njinga's enduring influence, you feel a quiet connection to her spirit, the unyielding strength, the fierce compassion, and the relentless will to shape one's destiny. The night deepens around you, the world quieter now, as if listening to the whispers of history carried on the wind. Njinga's story is no longer just about the past. It lives in the present, inviting you to carry it forward. You sit back as the final threads of Njinga's tale gently unravel the tapestry of her life, revealing its intricate, sometimes contradictory, but always captivating design. The queen who defied empires, forged alliances, and ruled with iron will now exists not just in history books, but in your imagination, a live, breathing complex. Her story closes not with a bang, but a whisper, a reminder that history isn't only about battles won or lost, but about the echoes that persist, the legacies that shape futures unseen. Njinga's reign stands as a testament to resilience in a world that demanded she be less than she was. Instead, she became more a force of nature, a living legend. You think back on her throne made from the back of a servant, an uncomfortable but powerful symbol of the costs of power and the burdens leaders carry. It's a throne that asks hard questions about justice, sacrifice, and the nature of authority. Njinga never shied away from these questions. She lived them daily. As the night deepens, you feel a calm settling over you. The the story's weight lifting into something lighter, something softer. Njinga's life, with all its fierce battles and tender moments, invites you to reflect on your own journey. What thrones do you sit upon knowingly or unknowingly? What legacies will you carry forward? The world outside your window hums quietly, the fan's gentle breeze brushing against your skin. You breathe in deeply, letting the rhythm of Njinga's story sync with your own heartbeat. It's a lullaby of strength, complexity, and survival, perfect for easing into sleep. Historians will keep debating Njinga's life as they should, because great stories resist simple endings. They demand engagement, questioning, and deeper understanding. But for now, you can rest with the knowledge that you've journeyed through one of history's most fascinating lives, gently cradled by the past's soft glow. Now, as the lights dim and your eyelids grow heavy, imagine Njinga's spirit walking beside you steady, fierce, and quietly proud. She has faced storms, shadows, and the weight of empires, and yet here she stands immortal in memory. So let yourself drift now, carried by the soft currents of history and the whispering winds of the night. Sweet dreams. The night deepens gently around you, the air soft and still like a whispered promise. As you close your eyes, feel the steady rhythm of your breath slowing your body, melting into the quiet dark. The story you've heard unfolds softly now, like a slow river winding through ancient forests, carrying with it leaves of memory and light. Njinga's life, with all its fierce moments and tender spaces, lingers like a warm ember in the cool night. The throne she held, made from the backs of others yet borne with dignity, reminds you that every strength has its shadows, every legacy its layers. Yet within that complexity lies beauty, resilience, and hope. Let the images fade gently, the echo of drums, the flicker of firelight, the calm of a queen at dusk. The past folds into the present, and you feel a calm connection threading through time. You are part of this vast, winding story held safely in its embrace. Rest now, letting the quiet wash over you, soothing and deep. Tomorrow, the world will be waiting with all its noise and light. But for now, sink into this peaceful pause carried softly by the night's gentle hum.